We now go down to Florida and the story of this man, 38-year-old Marlon Brown. He was killed last May when a police officer in Florida ran into Brown with his police car. Now, as you'll see in this dash cam footage showing the incident, Brown was pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt. He fled from the officers. And that's when Deland police officer James Harris sped onto the scene, drove past the officers in pursuit, and slammed his cruiser right into Brown, who had slipped and fallen on the ground. Brown died from his injuries, and Officer Harris was fired. But is that all that should happen? The city of Deland did pay a settlement of $550,000 to Brown's ex-wife for his death. That settlement also protected the city from any further legal action. But the family of Marlon Brown wants the officer who killed him to face vehicular manslaughter charges. Earlier this month, a grand jury looked at the evidence and decided not to charge former Officer Harris with any crime. But according to an attorney representing the family, Marlon Brown was executed in a vegetable garden. I was joined earlier by Matthew Feeney, assistant editor for Reason.com and Reason 24/7 News. And I first asked Matthew, assuming Officer Harris stopped his vehicle, jumped out, and fired 3 shots into Marlon Brown and killed him, wouldn't he be facing some sort of murder charges? But the fact that he used his car to kill him and he did not receive any charges, does that make any sense?
I mean, well, I'm obviously not a lawyer, but it does seem very strange to me that, particularly in light of the video that was released, that he's not actually facing any criminal charges. I'm totally bemused by the grand jury decision here not to actually have criminal charges pressed. It is very strange indeed. I mean, what is, I think is also worth remembering is that the medical examiner initially said that that Brown wasn't killed by the impact of the car, but as the footage you just showed reveals, it's hard to see how he wasn't. Yeah,
the medical examiner said he was asphyxiated from being trapped under the car. Mm-hmm. Then we have the funeral home that buried Brown saying, look, the body sustained massive trauma. Mm-hmm. That almost looks like, and I don't want to speculate, but it almost looks like they were trying to do a cover-up here of what actually happened, not knowing that a video might be released or something.
Well, no, and the video was only released after the initial incident was reported. And I think what is also sort of interesting is that the settlement given to the family is in place, but the officer is still not facing criminal charges. So the family are going to get money, but the officer involved is not in any trouble. And like I said earlier, if you look at the video, it seems like there's ample space for the officer to stop his car. And it's also worth remembering that there was, this was a chase that started because of a seatbelt violation. Yeah. This is hardly an armed robbery. It's hardly a drug chase or anything like that.
We hear about these sort of wrongful deaths at the hands of police fairly often. Last week we had Jonathan Farrell, a Florida A&M University student. He was in a car accident. He was trying to seek help, and I guess he was waving his arms too wildly in the street and was shot and killed by police. We just had 5 officers who were charged with civil rights violations in New Orleans post-Katrina for shooting and killing unarmed people, civilians on a bridge. Their conviction was recently overturned. Does this sort of culture of impunity, of police not really facing any consequences when they step over any boundaries, fuel more police brutality moving forward?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that police are getting away with sort of these outrageous...
Getting away with murder.
No, well, yeah, and well, I think it not only fuels perhaps a culture of this, perhaps in police forces, but it also sort of reinforces a culture in some parts of this country of people not trusting the police. And, there are entire communities across this country where police are not viewed as people who enforce safety or are, protectors of property. I mean, myself growing up, I was always told if you're in trouble, call the police or approach a police officer, but that's not what a lot of people are told across this country.
But at the same time, there seems to be a lot of deference given to the police. I want, a resident told a local news outlet that the officer was just doing his job. Everyone knows that you don't run from the cops unless you did something wrong and have a reason to run. You don't just run because you weren't wearing a seatbelt. Could there be a cultural problem here, too? I mean, Marlon Brown was, he had been arrested several times before. He'd been convicted of some felonies before. is there a problem where we just immediately assume this guy's a bad guy? He doesn't deserve any rights or any...
Sure, and actually over at Reason, my former colleague who's now at The Atlantic, Mike Riggs, mentioned that, you know, he had a suspended license and was on probation, but that hardly seems worthy of a high-speed chase, which ensued. I mean, this whole case is full of so many tragic elements, especially because, you know, we have these stupid seatbelt laws to begin with, and why it's anyone's business if, you know, someone in, I think it was, you know, in the very, very early hours of the morning is driving around without a seatbelt is totally beyond me.
Yeah, and again, it shows the importance of having videotape evidence on police, whether it's dash cam videos or just citizens being able to record.
The case also highlights that even with videos, people get away with stuff.
That's a good point. Matthew Feeney, assistant editor at Reason.com and Reason 24/7 News. Thanks.